At 68, I walked away from a career that paid me more than $1 million a year and returned to the town that raised me. 7 days later, I stood on Main Street and realized almost nobody knew my name. I had imagined homecoming as recognition. I pictured old doors opening, familiar voices calling across the street, and a part of me that had been waiting 49 years finally relaxing. Instead, a young cashier looked at my out-of-state license and asked kindly, "Are you visiting?" I am 73 now. For most of my adult life, people knew me before I entered a room. I was a mergers and acquisitions attorney in Chicago. My firm put my name on doors, clients waited for my advice, and in my final full year, my compensation passed $1.2 million. That number sounds like freedom. In practice, it purchased beautiful rooms I barely occupied. I knew the price of companies, the leverage inside a contract, and the exact tone that could silence a difficult meeting. I did not know my neighbor's last name. Some weeks, I knew my daughter's schedule only because my assistant had entered it. Success did not make me cruel. It made me efficient, and efficiency can resemble care for a very long time. I paid for things. I solved problems. I arrived late with expensive gifts and believed the price covered the absence. The first crack appeared when my father died. Walter Hale had owned the little service station in Hawthorne Falls, Ohio, where I grew up. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was preparing a closing. I watched his name light the screen and thought, I will call him after the signatures. There was no after. He died that evening. My sister had already reached the hospital by the time I boarded a plane. At his house, I found a paper bag with 2 tomatoes from his garden and a note in his blocky handwriting. For Richard, if he gets home this week. I carried that note in my briefcase for 5 more years. I completed deals, made partner emeritus, and accepted a Lifetime Achievement Award beneath a ballroom chandelier. When the applause ended, my daughter Claire found me alone near the coat room. She did not accuse me. That would have been easier. She simply asked, "Dad, when people stop needing your answer, who will know you?" I had defended companies against questions worth billions. I had no defense against that one. 3 months later, I left the firm. I told everyone I was going home. The sentence sounded noble, almost cinematic. What I did not say was that I expected Hawthorne Falls to hand me back the person I had been before ambition became my only fluent language. The town was smaller than memory and larger than my understanding. The service station was a pharmacy. The movie theater was an indoor storage business. My childhood house had blue siding, 2 bicycles in the yard, and a family whose history there did not include me. I bought a restored brick house 3 streets away. On the first morning, I put on the navy blazer I wore for informal client meetings and walked downtown as though the right clothes could explain me. Nobody looked twice. At Bell's Hardware, I asked whether anyone remembered Walter Hale. The cashier apologized and called an older employee. He remembered the station, not me. I heard myself list my father's habits, our old address, and the year I graduated, trying to prove that I belonged. Then I saw Eddie Morales at the end of the aisle. Eddie and I had played shortstop and second base together. At 19, he drove me to the bus station when I left for college. I had promised I would be back by Christmas. Eddie studied my face for several seconds before saying, "Richard?" There was recognition, but no reunion music. He shook my hand, asked about the city, and returned to choosing screws for a broken cabinet. I felt offended by how ordinary the moment was. That feeling embarrassed me, so I disguised it as generosity. I offered the library $100,000 for a reading room. I offered the council free legal advice. I proposed a scholarship before I had learned the high school principal's name. People thanked me. A small brass plaque appeared in the library. Yet when I entered the diner, conversations did not widen to include me. The men by the window nodded politely and continued discussing a roof, a granddaughter, and a fishing trip I knew nothing about. I mistook their history for exclusion. I began sentences with, "In Chicago, we would..." I corrected the volunteer committee's budget. I reorganized a food drive schedule no one had asked me to touch. I was trying to become important before I had become familiar. Eddie finally invited me for coffee. He listened while I described everything I had offered and how little warmth I received. Then he said, "You came back with a resume, Rich. We needed a neighbor." I told him that was unfair. I had left a fortune on the table. I had moved my entire life. Eddie stirred his coffee and said, "You keep telling us what you gave up. Have you asked what your leaving cost anybody here?" He reminded me of Christmases I had missed, my father's surgeries, and the funeral of our coach. He was not keeping score. He was describing the empty space where shared years should have been. The town had not forgotten me out of spite. It had continued without me. I went home angry and stood before the award I had hung above my desk. The engraved words called me visionary, trusted counselor, and leader. None of them meant friend. None meant son. None meant the person someone would call when a basement flooded at 2 a.m. Claire visited that weekend. I gave her a tour of the house, then complained that people treated me like a stranger. She looked at the unopened moving boxes and asked how many people I had invited inside. The answer was none. She said, "Maybe you came here to be remembered, not to know anyone." That sentence hurt because it was precise. I wanted the town to confirm that the boy I had been still mattered. I had shown almost no curiosity about the people they had become. My lowest moment arrived at Founders Day. I had donated enough to cover the event tent and assumed I would be asked to speak. Instead, a volunteer handed me a pair of work gloves and pointed toward 200 folding chairs. For 10 minutes, I considered leaving. Then an elderly woman named Mrs. Alvarez took the chair beside mine. She had taught English at my old high school, though never in my class. Together, we opened chairs in silence. After a while, she asked what I missed most about my father, not what he had owned, not how he died, what I missed. I told her about the whistle he used when he swept the station floor. It was the first honest conversation I had had since returning. Mrs. Alvarez said, "Then help us set up again next Saturday." There was no ceremony in the invitation. That was exactly why it mattered. I began with chairs, then boxes at the food pantry, then Wednesday meals at the church hall, where my job was to refill water pitchers and listen when people told the same story twice. The lawyer in me wanted measurable progress. Belonging offered none. No quarterly report announced that I was 12% less foreign. There was only repetition. The same room, the same time, the same promise, kept when no one was impressed. I learned that Eddie's wife had arthritis and that he hated asking for help. I learned Mrs. Alvarez called every recipe a suggestion. I learned Nora at the library was was trying to keep the children's room open on Saturdays with 3 volunteers and a broken radiator. This time, I did not begin with a check. I asked Nora what would help. She said, "Can you read at 10 and stay until the parents arrive?" So I read badly, did 3 different voices for a bear, and stayed. Weeks became months. The expensive blazer remained in the closet. I started carrying work gloves in the car. People stopped asking how long I was visiting. They began asking whether I could bring ice on Wednesday or drive Mrs. Alvarez to an appointment. One winter night, a storm cut power across the east side. At the fire hall, I expected someone to ask me to organize. Eddie handed me a clipboard and said, "Write down who still needs blankets." I wrote names for 6 hours. At dawn, a young father I barely knew passed me a cup of coffee and said, "I am glad you were here." It was quieter than the applause at my retirement dinner. It reached a place the applause never had. Money was not the enemy. I still used it. I paid for the library radiator anonymously and helped fund a trade apprenticeship after the school had defined what it needed. The difference was that money became support, not an introduction. I also called Claire without an agenda. I asked about her ordinary Tuesday. I stopped converting every worry into advice. One evening, she said, "You sound different." I asked whether different felt better. She said, "It feels like you are actually here." If you are leaving a powerful career, retiring, or returning to a place that once knew you, there are 4 things I wish someone had told me. First, arrive without your resume. Your achievements are real, but they are not a substitute for relationship. Resist the urge to prove your value in the first conversation. Ask 3 sincere questions before offering one solution. Second, grieve the place that no longer exists. The shop may be gone. Your friends may have moved. Someone else may live in the house that still appears in your dreams. Grief is more honest than demanding the present perform your memory. Third, choose one small place and show up repeatedly. Not once for a photograph, not only when you can lead. Pick a library hour, a meal, a walking group, a neighbor's porch, or a weekly phone call. Let reliability introduce you. Fourth, allow people to know who you are now. I hid behind career stories because they were polished. Friendship grew when I admitted I missed my father, feared becoming irrelevant, and did not know how to begin again. A title can make people answer quickly. It cannot make them trust you. A donation can open a room. It cannot create a place for you inside it. Belonging is built from repeated attention, remembering names, keeping small promises, receiving stories you cannot improve, and staying after the interesting part is over. I once believed becoming a stranger was the price of leaving home. Now I think remaining a stranger would have been the price of coming back unchanged. 5 years after my return, I walked into Bell's Hardware for a box of screws. A new cashier looked up and said, "You are Richard from Wednesday Meals, right? Mrs. Alvarez said you might drive her on Friday." She did not know about the $1 million salary, the ballroom award, or the deals that once put my name in newspapers. She knew where I showed up. I have never received a better introduction. Eddie and I now drink coffee most Thursdays. We do not pretend the missing decades disappeared. Sometimes he tells a story that includes everyone but me. I have learned to enjoy it without trying to insert myself. My father's note still rests in my desk. For Richard, if he gets home this week, I used to read it as evidence of the week I failed him. Now it reminds me that getting home is not one dramatic decision. It is a practice. I left $1 million career because I thought home would remember me. Becoming a stranger taught me something better. A meaningful life is not being recognized everywhere. It is being expected somewhere for the right reasons. If your job title disappeared tomorrow, where would your presence still matter? You do not need to share the whole story. If this question reached you, leave one word in the comments: neighbor. Then choose one small place to show up again.